The pool deck at Casa de Builds is in rough shape with broken and rotting decking boards, so this project is all about upgrading my deck with composite deck boards, how to install them, and adding LED lights. Now I'm going to discuss whether it's better to use composite decking versus traditional lumber, the cost differences, and the trade-offs between the two. Now this wood was all rotted and nasty and not worth salvaging for a future reclaimed wood project. However, it'll be great for my fire pit. I also found out this wasn't a traditional deck by any means as I took it apart, so I'm going to speed through that deck structure portion since this is not how I would recommend anyone else build up the deck joist unless you have that same issue that I do. And as always, make sure to check with your local building codes. With the old deck gone, I discovered there were 3 fully functioning sprinkler heads hidden underneath that old deck, which likely contributed to how rotted those old deck boards were. So before moving on, I made sure to cap off all of the sprinkler heads. Now I'm replacing the old deck joist with some new ground contact pressure treated 2x4s, but I'm going to build the inner structure of the deck much the same as it was before. I set the height of this first board to reference the string line off of, and this allows me to adjust all the boards down the line to match this height. The decking I'm using for this project is Trex Enhanced Composite Decking in Saddle Brown, and the manufacturer recommends having the joists no less than 16 inches apart on center. After cutting the joist to length, I used some shims to set the height to match the string line, and then cut a 2x4 to match to act as the post. Again, this is not the traditional way to build a deck by any means, but this actually worked really well for my unique situation. I'm planning another deck down the road, and I'll get into more detail about traditional deck building in that project. I bought these 16-foot long Trex composite boards from my Home Depot and had them delivered to my house, so step 1 is carrying these super awkward boards into the backyard. First up, I'm going to build a picture frame style border, which just means there's a 45-degree mitered edge board that frames the main decking boards. My deck is actually 31 feet long, so I have to create 2 picture frame borders that butt up against one another. Now, before I can even manage to attach the boards, Norman and Olive decided to jump in and test them out, and I've got to say, this project is already weenie approved. Where those miter corners connect, I added some additional blocking to give myself something to attach the deck boards to, and it was raining like crazy all week, so everything looks a little bit muddy here. I'm using a set of 1/16 inch handy shims to set my spacing, and this should account for any expansion that may occur and prevent those joints from buckling in the sun. Now I can switch over to using the deck jig to attach the inside edges of these boards to the joist. Here I'm starting on the second half of the picture frame border by using these 16th inch spacers to butt the shorter dimension border pieces up against one another. Again, I'm using that drill bit and stop collar from the Kreg deck jig to pre-drill all my holes, and the Kreg deck screws, which are specifically made to use with composite decking like this. While most of the remaining screw heads will be hidden, these outer pieces do need to be screwed from the top down into the joist, but if you set consistent spacing, it still looks pretty good, and it's still much better than having all of your deck screws visible. Before moving on to the remaining deck boards, I need to switch gears and install the LED lights while I still have access to connect all the wiring. Here I'm using an offcut of a Trex board for a drill placement guide, and I'm also using a 15/16 Forstner bit to drill all the holes. I test fit the drop-in LED lighting, and as you can see, it's a perfect fit. This 15/16 bit is not a typical Forstner bit most folks have, so I'll make sure to leave a link for the bit, the lights, and everything else I use down in the description below. For my deck, I laid out the lights 11 inches from each end and then 27 inches apart, which for me hit that perfect spot of having just enough lights without overdoing it. Also, that Trex decking is extremely easy to drill through with this Forstner bit and creates these super satisfying shavings. Okay, back to those lights. These are waterproof outdoor LEDs in warm white and specifically made to install into a deck. The great thing about this kit is how each connection slots together with a foolproof keyed 2-pin connector that's secured with this threaded collar. The whole system is powered with a plug-in 12-volt power supply. I also added a dimmer switch that comes with a remote and bought a pack of extension wires, which I ended up needing. Again, I'll have a link for all of these down below. After threading the wires through the hole, I added a dab of construction adhesive to secure each one, and if I ever need to replace one of these lights, that construction adhesive should be pretty easy to cut away. And here on the end, the wires didn't quite reach, so I was able to use one of those extension wires to bridge that gap. The way I'm building this deck means I had to measure twice and cut once so I didn't mess up the fit and cut these deck boards too short. And of course, I did just that off camera, but thankfully I bought a few extra boards, so it was fine. Once I had all those boards cut and laid out, I attached the fascia boards first. Again, these fascia boards require me to drill directly through the face of the board into the post. Now, as I attach all these boards, you can see that those Trek boards that I found have these grooved edges, and that groove is visible on the leading edge of the deck. I've got a little trick up my sleeve to address that issue here in a bit that I think worked out super well, but you be the judge. I drove in the remaining deck screws down the length of the fascia boards and used this scrap block and a pry bar to pull the lower fascia board flush to the top. For the right side lower fascia board, I had to contend with a curb, so I used my jigsaw to notch out the end to make it fit. I can attach the remaining deck boards with the Kreg deck jig and these 1/4-inch spacers that come with the jig. The 1/4-inch spacing of the deck boards allows small pieces of debris to fall through those cracks and not collect on top, and the spacing also allows for any moisture underneath the deck to escape. Also, with that 1/4-inch spacing, there's enough room to use the deck jig on those inside faces where the deck board mates to the deck board in front of it that was already attached, which I think is super handy as far as installing the deck and makes it go a lot faster. The jig comes with 3 options for placing those deck screws, and these 2 angled pilot holes allow for drilling hidden deck screws into tight spaces where you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. And of course, I'll have a link for the Kreg deck jig and the deck screws that I used down below. Like I said, I had a trick up my sleeve for covering that exposed groove on the edge of the deck, and here you see me attaching this aluminum extrusion with some wood screws. I'm drilling through the 2 pre-drilled holes that are already in the extrusion, and if this ends up not being enough to hold it secure, I can always add some more screws later. The last piece of extrusion hung off the edge, so I used this cutoff tool to trim that excess. Now, this aluminum extrusion is made specifically for this RGB LED neon rope that I got off Amazon, and that neon rope pressure fits snugly down into the extrusion. Now, I don't think I'll need to add any sort of construction adhesive or anything else, but really, time will tell. And I can always come back and add some later. The neon rope comes with these clearly marked cut lines. I turned off the power and cut off the excess, and then sealed the end off camera to make sure it was waterproof. And with that, this deck upgrade project was done. Now let's break down the benefits of using composite decking over lumber. Each of these Trex decking boards cost about $28 for a 16-foot length, and this project required 18 of them plus a few extra just to be safe. The total was a little over $600. Now, if I had used pressure-treated pine deck boards, they would have cost me about $18 each, or about $200 less up front. Now, the trade-off is the Trex decking has a bit more of the upfront cost, but doesn't require any finish, any stains, or yearly maintenance. Plus, I just think it looks better. Now, I have heard some folks say composite decking is hotter during those sunny days, but so is all the concrete around the pool deck that I have to walk across to get to this deck, so it's really not a big deal to me. I think composite decking wins unless you're willing to spend the extra money on something really nice like a tropical hardwood such as Ipe, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts, so make sure to leave a comment below or message me on Instagram. These LEDs that I use add a fun touch and some needed lighting at night, and I like that I can set it to look either subdued or go full pool party mode. Again, I've got links to all the products that I use down in the description below. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to keep up with all my projects. And as always, thanks for checking this one out, and I'll see you back here next time.